Hey everyone, Ryan Young, KAATARO Jiu-Jitsu. I hope you're doing well. So, let's go over the latest controversy that we have. And it was that lawsuit that happened in the state of California with a Jiu-Jitsu black belt. Was doing no-gi. I don't know if they always do no-gi, but anyway, so it was in a no-gi situation. And this instructor, he did a flip over, back take from turtle. And what he did was, I'm sure you've all seen it by now. And what happened was the student got his neck broken. Really, really bad injury, and it's very unfortunate that that happened. And my heart goes out to him. You know, it's a very hot button issue, and it really should not be, but it is. So I'll tell you why. Well, I'll give you a little background in case you've been living under a rock, which a lot of times I am, because I didn't even know about this until people started asking me about it. I'm like, hold on, let me go look into it. So this is a guy who was in a turtle position, the victim was, and his instructor had him in a semi-seatbelt, not really a seatbelt, because he was locked over his left arm. Instead of going over his left shoulder and under his right arm and then locking up in a seatbelt, he had one arm under, his right arm under the victim's right arm, and he had his left arm over the victim's left arm. So he basically had his arm stuck like this, and was under the shoulder on the other side. So I'm not lifting this arm up because I'm holding the camera up here. So so what he did was he flipped over in the hopes of them both somersaulting over and ended up taking the back. So it's a flashy way to take somebody's back. Not necessarily the best way to do it, but it's kind of flashy. And it's risky, because what you're doing is you're putting somebody over their own neck. And what happened was the victim, and I call him a victim because that's what happened. You know, he was the one who got, taken. So his neck was pointed in the same direction of the shoulder he was rolling over. So what happened was your neck doesn't go that way. You actually have to turn away to roll over your left shoulder, which is what happened with this guy. The black belt came over his left shoulder. So the victim needed to be looking this way and then rolling over, and they both would roll over, and it would have been just fine. He would have got his back taken. Well, of course, he doesn't want to get his back taken, so he might have been fighting it. Which is another problem that we have. One thing, though, is we are in an inherently dangerous activity called Jiu-Jitsu. And like any sport, actually, or any activity, you can get injured, seriously injured, doing anything. But to not get injured doing a martial art and to expect that you're not going to get injured, that's very unrealistic, right? So who would go into Jiu-Jitsu thinking that? Well, we don't. We go in wanting to learn something, in this case, Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, but we know that there's always a potential for injury. Anytime you do something physical, you're rolling the dice as far as injury goes. All you can do is take steps necessary to minimize the chance of injury, but you can never truly eliminate it, right? You can be walking and you'll get injured. Now, it's not likely you're going to get injured walking, but there's always that possibility. What you want to do is take all precautions when training so that you don't get this type of situation, which is what ended up happening. So what would we do? Number one is, if I am doing that, which I don't, if I'm doing that particular back take, I'm going to first, as I'm going, I'm going to look. And I'm going to look at my partner and say, look, you need to look the other way. Okay, and they look. As soon as they go, then I roll over, but I'm always sure to chock their head and their shoulders so that neither of them move. And then I'll flip over on this side. If I don't do it, there's always a chance. So for me personally, number one, I don't do it. But there are other stuff that I would do that could potentially injure someone. So I always make sure that my opponent is set up in the right way so that when I move them, they don't get injured. What's another example? A hip bump from guard, right? Hip bump sweep. If your opponent who is in your guard doesn't tuck his feet under, when you do the hip bump and his foot is sticking out, kind of like a kickstand, you're going to break something. And that I've seen before. The way I think about it is this. for me, trying to do a particular concept. Is it worth injuring my opponent? Of course not. So if I'm given a choice between successfully implementing what I want or injuring my opponent, I'm going to choose to, not injure my opponent. I'm just going to let him have whatever he wants and just give it to him, right? If he doesn't want to let me take his back and he's in turtle, which is another thing, then I won't take it. So now, what problem do I have with turtle? First of all, turtle's a bad spot to be in because you can't fight from the turtle position. Well, granted, all right, Eduardo Telles created this whole DVD series back when we had DVDs, right? His whole DVD series on being able to submit your opponent from turtle. So he'd start in turtle, and then his whole plan was to submit you, whether it be to set up your arm, to basically do, I guess, a version of a sweep from turtle. But I never let my students play turtle, right? Turtle is merely a transitional position, meaning you're in it and you're only in it for a split second until you get to your back or you get to another position. You get to standing up something, but you're not staying in turtle as a strategy, right? So what you're doing by turtling is you're exposing your spinal cord, right? And here's a perfect example of this. If you watch Gracie Jiu-Jitsu 5, or is it Gracie Fights 5? Gracie, I don't know. It's on YouTube. It was put out by the Gracie Academy. Gracie Challenge 5, that's what it is, Gracie Challenge 5. You'll see that one. And that was one of the challenge matches for Master Dave Kama. This is, by the way, if you didn't watch it, go watch it. It's very interesting. It's, old Gracie Challenge days. Dave Kama did a bunch of them. In fact, from what I understand, he was the first non-black belt Gracie Academy member, right? He's one of the old school guys. He's one of the first non-black belt Gracie Academy members who did a challenge. For the most part, they would, have black belts do it. But Dave, at that time, was a blue belt. And just a little quick note about him. If you see what happens, I mean, his technique is extraordinary at blue belt. So this is where he was fighting. And this is an actual fight. It's not a, not a match. He was fighting a guy who just listed off all the martial arts he did. Kali, Eskrima, Pencak Silat, that Indonesian ground fighting thing. But anyway, so he had gotten to turtle a couple of times. Once he got to turtle, the first match, and Dave flattened him out and choked him out, and he tapped. The second fight they had, the guy ended up stopping the fight, middle of the fight, saying that, he has nothing against Dave, and, he had a shot to hit Dave, devastatingly. He didn't use that word, but that's what you would take from that. But then, but then chose not to. So ended up they got into a third fight, and this is where he went to turtle, and then you could see Dave throw an elbow on the guy's back. Dave had his hooks in, sitting on his hips. The guy goes in turtles, and Dave just goes boom, right? Hit him in the back. Now, sometimes what they do, like if you look at the old Gracie in Action video, Gracie Jiu-Jitsu in Action, I think it was Halls. Halls was in that situation. And what he did was he threw the elbow onto the trap muscle of the karate school owner. He didn't go to the spine, which he could have, right? Which is what Dave ended up doing to the guy, at which point immediately Horian Gracie yelled, choke, 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 meaning don't do that and choke him instead. So that's what he did. But that just goes to show that you put yourself in a bad position, you put yourself in a spot to where bad stuff could happen. So in this situation that happened in California, this guy was turtled. And then his training partner, in this case, who was the instructor of the school, went ahead and did that flip over back take, attempted to do it. And he actually he could have done it, but ended up broke the guy's neck in the meantime. So it all started with turtle. So number one is don't do turtle, right? Okay, well, but Ryan, that's part of a game. Well, get it out of your game. Stop doing that stuff. That stuff has no benefit whatsoever in a fight. And as we see from a non-fight, from a simple no-gi grappling exchange, it ended up breaking this guy's neck. So number one, don't do those positions anymore. So number two, is it preventable? Yes. Don't be in turtle. Now, let's say you're in turtle. Is it preventable? Yes, but you got to know how to roll. All right, so now what you're going to do is, I don't know about you guys, but for us, every day in class, as part of our warm-up, we do forward rolls, right? You roll over side, you roll backward, left, right, not backward. Forward, left, right, you know, the old judo rolls, right? But you're rolling over, you're doing it correctly. And then what we do is after that, we do backward rolls. So when you do backward roll, you roll over this gap here, and then you go the other way, roll over that gap. So you're always moving your head out of the way and turning your head in the correct direction so that you don't get injured when you get rolled over, either going forward or rolling backward, right? Because those are the ways that you can hurt your neck. So that's part of our training for our students. I'm not saying that it wouldn't happen in our studio. But what I'm saying is that if you always are in that situation, as we are every single time you come to class, then you're less likely to be caught in that situation where your head is pointing the wrong way when you're getting rolled over. So that being the case, it could have been prevented for both the instructor by looking at it, seeing his head's the wrong spot, and telling him, okay, turn your head the other way. No, you're not going to turn your head the other way? Okay, I'll do something else. That would have been what the instructor should have done. On the other hand, the guy on the bottom is not blameless because he put himself in that position to begin with. Now, what if you didn't know any better? Well, then you should have known because, you know, okay, well, this guy was a white belt. Well, he was a 3-year white belt. And he was also a wrestler, probably in high school or whatever, high school, college, I don't know. But he wrestled. So they know grappling. So they get stacked and thrown and stuff all the time. So, you know, yes, it could have happened. Now, why did it happen? I don't know because I wasn't there. What could have happened was that maybe, you know, because a lot of people go, oh, he's a wrestler. It's like, well, big deal. I mean, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if he's a wrestler, grappler, whatever. I mean, physiologically, you can't do that, right? So you can't blame him in that case, you know, for his experience in grappling. And the only reason why I'm saying that is because I've had people from both sides call me and talk to me about it, or message me, and, you know, we subsequently talk about it. And some people, they're on the fence, you know, as far as what side they're on. And really, do you need to be on a side? No, you don't need to be. But if you're going to choose a side, you're going to choose a side. Simple as that. So I just play the devil's advocate. I say, okay, so, you know, what if I'm the student? Then the instructor shouldn't have done this and this and this. Well, conversely, if I'm the instructor, the student shouldn't have done this, this, and this, right? So there's fault to go around everywhere. So at the end of the day, though, the student needed to have his head gone one way and not the other way. And the instructor should have seen that his head was in the wrong way and should have not done it. Simple as that. All right. So now that's that. So some people have commented on the fact that Rener Gracie, who put a pretty, I'd say it was a good video that he did explaining the case to the best of his ability. And we all know Rener is a very articulate person, and he's very good at getting his point across. So what he said was he was brought on as an expert witness, which, yeah, he is an expert witness, and he was paid for it, which some people were making a crack about him getting paid for it. Okay, tell me what expert witness does not get paid for his time, right? And if you do particularly well in life, your time is worth a lot of money. So to expect to get paid to not work on your endeavor of life, your business, to be pulled out of that to testify, then yes, you should be compensated for it. And, you know, I don't know why people were on Rener on it, because on the other side, on the defense side, was Clark Gracie, right? From what I understand, you know, he said second cousin. He didn't name him, but somebody else had told me that it was Clark Gracie. Okay, so you got two Gracie family members, two, third generation Gracie family practitioners that are on opposite sides. But at the end of the day, the consensus opinion was that, and I think it was both sides, that it could have been prevented, right? And it easily could have been prevented. And that it was unfortunate, and that it wasn't malicious. It was definitely negligent, but it wasn't malicious. You know, the guy didn't intend to break his neck. He just happened to break his neck by doing things as an instructor wrong. At the same time, you know, the victim had his head pointed the wrong way. You know, there's fault on both sides, but, you know, all the fault went one way, which is to the instructor. So a lot of school owners are saying, you know, this is gonna change the business, and that Rener Gracie is to blame because he came out and came out for the plaintiff's side as a witness. Now, if the defense won, then people on the plaintiff side would be crying for it, you know, crying out loud what's going on, you know, how this is a travesty and all that. But, you know, there's always going to be one side that wins and one side that loses. The people that side with the losing side are always going to say that it was wrong, and people who are on the winning side are always going to say that it was right. I think those judgments are way out of hand. That's my opinion on that. However, how do you put a price on somebody who has life-changing injuries? I don't know. That's really the only thing that we have, which is why he got $40-some-odd million in the judgment. Of course, you know, it'll probably be appealed to a higher court to get that taken down, but it certainly can change the business of teaching jiu-jitsu. Right? I have no doubt that a lot of people will get out of teaching martial arts because of this. It's probably not the first time that something like this has happened. I mean, it's the martial arts. Martial means battle, right? So, you know, there are people that get hurt in martial arts all the time. But if this is the kind of things that can happen, then a lot of people are going to have second thoughts about teaching. On the flip side of it, if this can happen, then a lot of people are going to have second thoughts about training and learning. So it's probably bad for everyone all around. Another thing is kind of revisiting what we were talking about with that lawsuit thing. So you have to make sure that when you're going to do something like that as the instructor, and then watching other people, but for yourself, you have to make sure that when you move, you don't move from point 1 to point 2 all in one step. You have to kind of in the meantime, you have to look halfway through. Is his head turned the correct way? Just like how when we're practicing those throws where you just throw them, you got to make sure that their heads are going one way or the other. It's all about safety and teaching people right. Better that we slow down the teaching process to make sure that they don't get hurt, rather than continue through and have them get hurt, because those kinds of devastating effects can happen, right? That's kind of tragic because it takes out the person who's the victim, and it also takes out the school, right? And that person may have been a great instructor, but he's not going to be teaching anymore now. He's done.
So as far as the white belts go, in our curriculum, the only throw I can think of that's super dangerous with the neck is when they have the front headlock, pressure over the back of the neck, and you sit back, frame, and take them over if they don't turn their. That's the only one I can think of.
Yeah.
Is there another one I'm missing? I mean, every throw is potentially dangerous, right? But
that counter to the single leg.
Okay.
And then you hook them, and you grab over the back, and you sit down and you throw them.
Yeah.
What I did to you yesterday.
Let's not talk about that.
That's one. And then along the lines of that one with the guillotine, the same thing happens to if you do a drop seonage really fast and they don't see it coming, they'll spike. Yeah. So I as an instructor, I do that throw, but I never just bang, pull down, right? I always jump in, and I know I've got their balance. I'm underneath, their feet are right here, and I've got this, they're not going anywhere. And I just pull, and I go really slowly. I want them to see it. But that's why the forward roll and efficiently doing the forward roll is so important, especially for kids. Right? That's why we got to keep working on it, keep working on it, keep working on it. That break falls, super important. Base, super important. Right? It just goes back to my thinking has always been that way with kids and with adults, but more so with kids. Because kids you can throw more often because kids are lighter and they don't land with the impact. But at the same time, kids are not afraid of falling. Whereas adults, we develop a fear of falling. So if you teach the kids early on how to fall and how to roll and stuff, and you make it fun for them, then they'll have that skill for life. And the part that validated my requirement that we work on that so much with kids comes down to your daughter, right? I don't know if you remember when we were in the studio over in Parker Square, right? I don't know who it was. It was a beautiful
It
throw.
was the dad had the beard. The kid was a little off. Is it JD?
Yeah.
Yeah, the
JD?
beard.
Yeah.
What is that his name?
Yeah, it was JD or JB.
No, JD didn't throw
JD.
Alessandra. Alessandra went in the air.
Yeah, it was.
He hooked her.
Not JD. There's no way JD did that throw. I could be wrong, but all I know was I saw Alessandra's feet in the air, and I was sitting in the chair, and it was happening probably where you were, and my first thought was to run over there and catch her head, but it happened quick. But she went down, boom, her head didn't hit, she did a nice break fall, without even thinking, stopping, she got right back up and continued sparring. That's what I want to see. Right? Because there have been too many tournaments where I go and you see a kid get thrown and he doesn't know to do that, and he goes right on his head, or he lands on his back and his head does this, boom, on the mat. Kid stops crying. I mean, kid got a hit in the head. I mean, you don't want that, right?
They
So
gave their arm and snapped their arm.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, right. So teaching adults and kids to fall correctly is kind of a long process. Kids don't understand the logic of it all, the adults do. But the adults still react in the wrong way a lot of times, so you have to do it slowly with them because you know how they're going to react. That's why when people do a break fall, you know, it's always, you got to make sure that they do it well. And when they do it wrong, you need to point it out. No, don't put your hand up here. Hand is always here, right? And then don't cross your feet, right? It's always like this, right? So if you teach them the little parts and you teach them slowly, then, you know, a lot of times the students don't appreciate that effort. They don't see it. All they see is, I want to spar, I want to roll. And a lot of schools, some schools will not let people spar for the first year. We don't necessarily have that requirement. Our whole thing was make sure you get to guard pass 1 before you can start sparring. The rationale is that so they have all the defense, they've seen all the defense. They may not be super proficient at it, but they've seen it, and they can stop and think, okay, what do I do? Where do my hands go? Right? I think of him when he was training with David, who was much bigger than him. You know, we're talking like bigger than Mitchell at that time, right? With him, weaker than he is now. But I still remember being stuck under cross-side 1, and I saw him, you know, while he's getting smashed, you see the angst in his face, but you see him just kind of thinking, where do I put my hand, right? He knew what to do, and that's the important thing. Now, with everybody who's better, they've gone through the same thing. And that's the whole reason why we've run them through that curriculum, and that's the reason why we make sure they know what they need to know when they need to know it. That's why we don't skip for them, because if we skip, we may miss something in the foundational stuff they need to know, right? It's all about the safety of our members, because all you need is one situation like what happened and you're done, right? And if the goal is to teach as many people as you possibly can, one bad incident like that can mess everything up. So you need to be very consistent in your teaching with everyone. Right? That's why it's so important to get the teaching reps in and do it step by step. Don't try to outguess it. Don't try to outsmart it. Don't try to add other stuff that should not be in there yet. Otherwise, you're going to have these types of situations because the victim will not have the full foundation. They'll be missing parts, and they may not know that part about turning their head, which is one of the reasons why doing a forward roll is so basic. Had that guy simply understood the concept of a forward roll and which way to turn his head, he may still be walking around just fine. You know, this whole thing that's happening is a very polarizing issue with regard to the lawsuit and this judgment. You know, luckily for him, he gets $40-something million, but unluckily for him, that school is probably closed. You know, and if it's not closed, it'll be closed because now nobody's going to go there. That instructor, rightly or wrongly, will probably never run a school again, right? But, you know, all his students, the other students, I don't know if they felt the same way this guy did, but, you know, and by the way, I did no research on it, so I don't know. His school may still be open. I don't know. I'm just thinking that if that happened to me, then I'd be going, you know, what's the use, right? Why am I going to do this? Why am I doing this? You know, there's such a high risk, you know, and for little return, right? Martial arts schools in general don't make a lot of money, right? And a lot of you martial arts school owners can, you know, you can attest to that. You know, even a relatively successful school like Kama Jiu-Jitsu, after you pay the bills, there's not much profit. Right? It's not a profitable business. I mean, I can make a lot more money doing other stuff, right? But it's what I enjoy. But if the risk to the business is that which this, you know, Del Mar, BJJ or whatever took, then why would anybody do it? I don't know, right? So, you know, social media, it gets worked up into a frenzy, and then people, they choose sides, and they get really worked up about this. All I can say is this: protect yourself, right? You are responsible for your own protection. However, it is the job of the instructor to teach you in the safest way possible, while also trying to mitigate any potential injuries that could happen. But everybody is fully aware that injuries will happen regardless. I've suffered a ton of injuries as a result of jiu-jitsu. Now, have I suffered as many as others? I don't know. Some of them were, I don't know, maybe a little serious, and a lot of them were just nagging, right? So I can just kind of go through quickly what I've gone through, and you can kind of comment below what kind of injuries you went through. I had a dislocated rib right here in the front. In fact, it's still, it's connected, but it's poking out, right? So those of you who have popped a rib, you know what that's like. I've had an ACL repair, lateral meniscus repair. What else? I've popped my elbows a number of times. I haven't done them recently, but most of it happened when I was a white and blue belt. I've had that muscle that stretches when you bend your neck down. I've had that pulled multiple times. Let's call it 5 or 6 times, to the point where, you know, I'm like this. I have to drive. I got to turn my shoulders like this. You know, people go, why are you doing that? And it's like, because I can't turn my head because my neck was strained. You know, I had both shoulders worked on, as a lot of you guys know, right? I've had 4 epidurals done in my spine because of disc degeneration. Not sure if that's caused by jiu-jitsu or if it's just caused by old age, or who knows, right? It happened when I was in my early 40s, you know, and I had to get the injections in my spine. And I guess that's the extent of it. Oh, and my ears, you know, cauliflower ears, everybody gets that. I've had my tooth busted through my lip. I've had an eye vessel burst in my eye, but, you know, that was painless. I didn't even know it was there. But yeah, so that kind of stuff happens in jiu-jitsu. Now, so people are going to go, oh, you know, martial arts, especially jiu-jitsu, is too dangerous for my kids, so I'm going to have them do soccer. Well, one of my former students in the jiu-jitsu studio who played soccer his whole life, he's the same age as my daughter, he's 17, could be 18 by now, I'm not sure. Just recently broke his leg playing soccer, right? So stuff like that happens. And how many females, how many women especially, do you know that played soccer that tore their ACLs? Literally tore them. It happens with women more often than with men in soccer, but you know, men get it too. And in jiu-jitsu, we get torn ACL. You know, Master Dave, you know, he's had, you know, chronic knee pains and injuries. Professor Greg, who's in our Irvine studio, he's got neck and shoulder issues as well as knee issues. You know, and that's just kind of, you know, Professor Zach here in Dallas, you know, both knees. Yeah, and Professor Mike, both knees. Mike Saito. So if you become a black belt in jiu-jitsu, you're gonna have a share of injuries getting there. You know, it's funny. One thing that we like to say is that the goal is to have your body last long enough for you to earn your black belt. And then once you get your black belt, you're so busted up. But you know, the funny thing is, you know, I was talking to Dave about this years ago, and Hickson too. We talked to Hickson about it. The injuries are part of learning jiu-jitsu, part of being in jiu-jitsu, and there's really no way you can prevent it. At the same time, we really wouldn't change it either, for that matter. But you know, like I said, this particular gentleman, 3 years training and getting his neck broken, yeah, I'm sure he would wish he could go back. And I'm sure that the instructor wishes he could go back and look at this differently. So for you instructors going forward, try to look at everything from the utmost in safety for your students that you're not training with and for your training partners. You know, I always talk to my instructors about making sure they always look out for their members. You know, they're running their class. You know, you're not training while you're teaching while you're teaching. You're like this. You're looking, you're watching that and watching them, right? And you're keeping your eye on it. A lot of people, especially young people who run jiu-jitsu schools, they're not teaching, they're kind of teaching, but they're training alongside. So now if you're an instructor and you're training along with somebody, how are you going to see what goes on around your mat? You're not, right? So in that way, I think that instructors should be instructors. They shouldn't be training along with instructing, right? You have other time that you can set aside for your training. Now, if you're a student, you have to realize that nobody's going to protect you like you can protect you. That means that when you're training, you know, you're hoping that your partner, your training partner, whether it be an instructor or what, is not out to maliciously hurt you. Okay? But just know that there are so many variables in jiu-jitsu. Somebody moves fast, somebody moves heavy and fast. Somebody extends your arm further than it can extend. Somebody, you know, extends your shoulder or stretches your shoulder, like with an Americana or Kimura, more than it can stretch, right? All that stuff happens. We don't know our individual opponents' limitations at times. So you need to know them. So you need to practice protecting yourself, because at the end of the day, you are responsible for you being safe, right? And that's a self-defense mindset, right? Self-defense mindset is that I'm going to get injured, right? But I'm going to do everything I can to prevent injury. A lot of times people enter jiu-jitsu not thinking in those terms, and as a result, they get injured. And if they do get injured, they blame the person who did it to them. It's easy to blame somebody for something you should have taken care of. But yeah, my partner had me locked up and I couldn't do anything. Well, did you tap? Well, no, I thought I could get out. Well, then it's your fault. Turns out you couldn't get out now, could you? Right? So be very careful. Take responsibility for your own safety. If you're an instructor, take responsibility for your safety as well as the safety of your students and your training partners, right? And if you can do that, then we will all be able to train for multi-decades, which if you enjoy jiu-jitsu as much as I do, you're going to want to train for the rest of your life, right? So I, at age, shoot, I'll be 55 soon. You know, me at the age of 55, I need to make sure I protect myself, right? I eat right. I try to get as much sleep as I can. I try to get as much exercise as I can. And when I train, I try to train as safely as I can. Whether I win or lose, it no longer matters to me. I just want to get better. I just want to make my students better. I want to make my instructors better instructors. And I want everybody to be able to go home without having to go to the hospital first. Hopefully, that kind of gave you a little bit of insight on this whole situation that's going on, right? Don't get caught up in the hype and the name calling and the arguing and all that. Just realize there is a lot of responsibility to go around, but a court system will only choose. They can only be one winner, right? And in this situation, it was the instructor, right? I'm sad to say it was the instructor, but at the same time, there's things that I looked at that and I went, oh, right? Why? Because I wouldn't have done that. Right? Or I would have done certain things before I've done that or did that. What's the word? Anyway, doesn't matter. So be very careful with your training partners. Be very careful with yourself. If you want to come and visit us, please feel free. We have 3 locations. One in Irvine, California, where Master Dave teaches. One in Austin, Texas, where Professor Ken teaches. And one in Flower Mound, Texas, which is Dallas, Texas. Dallas and Fort Worth, which is where I teach. And you can also visit us online at KAATARO.com, where you can see our curriculum and you can see videos that go with the curriculum. And it's all in order too. So that's the old linear type of training that we talk about, that I've talked about in other videos. And lastly, not lastly, but you can also come visit us on our Shopify site, which the link should be below. And you can visit us if you want to buy any merchandise, like one of these nice Kama Jiu-Jitsu t-shirts. You know, we've got them in most colors and most sizes. We've also got jackets, gis, rash guards, all that kind of stuff. Really cool stuff. And you'd be helping out us, which helps out this channel, so I can keep putting out this kind of content. And then also, if you want coaching, you want to be motivated, you want to ask questions, right? A lot of people ask, hey, how can I ask you questions on jiu-jitsu and all that? Then you can reach me privately on my Clarity link, clarity.com/Ryan Young, if I'm not mistaken. And you can book an appointment there, and I'd be happy to spend the time and talk to you. Anyway, that's all I got for you. Take care. Happy training. Bye now.